So why is being a professor one of the toughest careers in the world? And I'm going to qualify something. I understand. I know that there are many different careers that exist. This was just something that was told to me recently. And I actually kind of admit that it is extraordinarily tough. And I would probably put it up there as one of the tougher careers that you can get into. And the only reason I say this is that I've seen many people, including people that are, from all walks of life, from Olympic athletes to people that were stars in their field in banking, to even people that are in construction go into the professor career and find that it's actually pretty hard. And so there's this one thing that you have to do that is challenging, and that is you're always creating something that nobody believes in. And you're always sitting there looking at it and trying to figure out, how do I convince, and this is logic. I don't know if most people understand this, but if you become a professor and you go through the normal path of a professor, it's called the tenure track path, you have to create ideas, and some fields are different than others. I understand that. So some basically like academic ideas or disciplines, right? Like the humanities versus engineering, those kind of things. They're different than others, and they face different patterns. But the general passageway is that you have to convince extraordinarily skeptical people that your ideas are sound. And those extraordinarily skeptical people are some of the smartest people in the world. And it doesn't matter where you go, what school you go to, it's always the same story. That you have to sit there and think about how to convince people that just don't want to be convinced about your particular idea. And you have to do that repeatedly for a long time. And it's kind of like creating new businesses, completely new businesses. It's not a perfect analogy, but it's like creating new businesses repeatedly and making sure that almost all of them are at least functioning and at least bringing in revenue. For those of you who haven't started businesses, I'd encourage you to go try it. You'll find out it's extraordinarily difficult. So my day-to-day, what it looks like, so I'm actually a professor. My day-to-day, what it looks like is I have to get up and I sit alone at a desk almost always. And I have to try to come up with an idea that is apparently never been done before, and that I can convince other people that this thing is actually worthwhile. And when you do that, you realize that it's extraordinarily difficult. And as well, you have to do that at a very high bar in terms of how often you have to produce these particular ideas. Like a lot. Most people that get into it, and they're extraordinarily talented, I'm going to tell you that most people are often near the top of their class at most places, and they come in at most programs and they realize that they very much struggle with it, right? So it's like being put into, it's very similar to, another good comparison is similar to like football in that way, or competitive swimming, or any domain where the best in a particular domain get invited to go and compete and try out, and you realize that you're racing against the top minds in the world. Or you're playing against the top people in the world. So, why, and I think about, okay, why is this? Why is this so challenging? I don't think this is going to change anytime soon. And I think that there is a lot, I think that there's just a lot of things to change. And I think, it's a fairly, from a productivity point of view, and for serving its purpose of creating ideas, it does okay. But that doesn't mean on the other side it's not extraordinarily difficult. I want you to listen to, either go into my YouTube channel or listen to these podcasts, and you'll hear that many days it is very difficult for me to get going. And a lot of it has to do with social isolation. That's a big thing. But I'm not sure how to learn better without that quiet time. I think it's okay to work in groups, but I don't think you lose a huge amount of productivity when you do that. And because of that, you may not actually do well. And I mean, working in groups where you're actually sitting there with other people, and you may not actually perform to the same level. Sometimes you get a great group, but most of the time it's not. And so a lot of this is alone time, a lot of thought by yourself. And I think that is the grinding part of it, is that you're competing against your own mind, and you're trying to wrestle with your own mind. Now there's pretty good evidence, convincing evidence. I'm always a little bit skeptical, but there's convincing evidence that doing a PhD, doing research actually causes depression. And, the uptake of actually taking, pills and things like that, medications for depression, is pretty significant. It's pretty staggering. So I think about this as, when you start your PhD, when you go through and continue on with it. So I think about this as, why, right? So it's this, you're wrestling with your own thoughts and in your own mind by yourself a lot of the time. And so these thoughts never really leave you, and they always stick with you. And then on top of it, you have often unachievable, just at the very limit, achievable goals that are being asked of you. Often they're very ambiguous. Nobody really knows what the right answer is. And often everybody else is feeling the same stresses as you are, so people often don't make time for other people. So it's this demanding, very difficult domain to be in, because of the fact that you are going against your mind, and you're thinking about how to do this every day. But also, not only that, it's not only coming up with an idea, but it's being able to write it down at an extraordinarily high rate, right? I almost always say, if you're not able to write 10 pages a day, and I think that's actually pretty reasonable, if you're not able to write 10 pages a day, then you're probably not going to make it in academia. And I know that is a crazy high bar, but that's just my own experience. And I still struggle with it. I still don't do well with it. And I don't write enough every day. I don't do enough every day. And my target is roughly about 10 pages of doing all of that. So that means, and then when I read, I might read, hundreds of pages a day if I'm going through that sort of cycle of reading at the time. And it's real reading, and sometimes it's very, very dense. Luckily, as I've been doing this longer, it does get a little bit easier, so I know what to look for and I know what I'm paying attention to. But it's still a large amount that you have to deal with. If you look at the doctoral classes that everybody has to deal with, you'll realize that, oh, I'm not lying. There is an extraordinary amount of reading that you have to read. Just one class in a domain, you might have to read 300-400 pages a week of dense material just in one class, and they often have to take 4 classes, right? So what does it say, right? It's these demands that are put on you in an ambiguous domain that often make it very, very difficult. And it's the hardest part is just getting back up and doing it again every day. And the hardest part is just sticking with that. You will see very few people stick with it for a long time. So what can we do with this? How are we going to manage this? I think the only answer, we're not going to change the institutions, we're not going to change any of those things. I don't think that is going to change. I don't think the patterns are going to change. I think it's about there's 2 things. First of all, trying to figure out how to frame it in a joyous way. And that's very difficult to do. I wrestle with this every day, of how to figure out how to turn this into a joyous thing. And then the second thing is figuring out how to detach, disconnect, disassociate, really, really detach in all aspects of your life at any given time from what you're doing. I think for me, it's unhealthy for me to be doing it too much and not have breaks, because I feel emotionally drained without any of those things. So I think those 2 things, and that's the other crazy making thing when I say this, is that you might not understand the expectation is work 7 days a week. So I cannot do that. And so I allocate time to spend with my family, and even just dead time. Even just time where I'm just not doing anything. Which is a little bit less today because I'm doing this whole reciprocity project, but I try. I think if you figure out how to do this, and I'm not saying I'm perfect, and you do this for a long time, I think dealing with some of these demands gets a little easier. It's not perfect, but you're able to deal with the day-to-day, and get back up and do it again. All right, take care. Have a wonderful day.